Hello my dear viewers, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for liking, subscribing, watching and commenting on those videos. Also, this took a week or 2 weeks to record because I was sick. So sometimes I just sound funny in the video, or I struggle with a word. You may hear it in the video, or my voice changes because I recorded when I was sick, when I woke up in the morning, or some other time. It took a long time to record this, but I will not blab anymore and let you listen to the video.
Old polytheistic religions of Europe have been slowly eroded and forgotten, most of them gone by the times of Renaissance and Middle Ages. Of course, Christianization and in some regions Islamization didn't destroy or erode the cultural practices that are still used by the local Muslims or Christians. But the old polytheistic religions have basically gone extinct. The line of religious practices passed on from generation to generation has been cut. The last authentic pagans in Europe are merry people where the practices and the religion itself survived the conversion to orthodoxy. Of course, there has been resurgence of pagan religions, but they are mostly reconstructions, and debatable reconstructions at best, of what the religions used to be. And the natural line of passing on the religion from generation to generation has also been cut. The first pagan resurgence happened in papal state, which is pretty ironic, as the papal curia was very much interested in the ancient culture, and they actually tried to bring it back, hence the Renaissance. Of course, this resurgence wasn't only about the statues and marble buildings. It was about the Hellenic religion of the past. As you can imagine, the current Pope, Paul II, did not like this movement because they were not only interested in the marble buildings and statues, but also the religion itself. They also prepared an assassination attempt to kill the Pope. One of them, Philip Bonicorsi, had to escape from the papal court into Constantinople, which was at the time a Turkish city. From there he traveled onward into Lviv, at the time ruled by Archbishop George of Santok. He gave him time to hide there and to outgrow his stupid paganism, as he called it. All this happened in the 1560s, during which there still lived pagans in Europe, especially in Lithuania, northern Scandinavia, Finland, Estonia, and of course, let's not forget, parts of Russia. I would also like add Tatars to this bunch. They saw themselves as believers of Allah, even if they thought of him as one of the gods, not as one god. In the 18th century, the Lutheran converses traveled to northern Scandinavia, such as northern Sweden and Norway, to convince the Sami people and their shamans that their religion was wrong. While at the same time, in the Middle East, the region was a refugium or refuge for the people still practicing before Christian and before Muslim beliefs, and where new religions were created constantly, not even about the Christian or Muslim beliefs. Of course, the dominating religion is Islam, the second is Christianity, which is a minority in the Middle East, but in Iran, Zoroastrians still hold fast. The centuries of prosecution did make them convert, but there are still groups who believe in the old ways. This religion counts from 15 to 30,000 believers. And of course, in Iran, they have a parliament seat. One of the gnostic religions that also almost disappeared because of the Arab Spring and the creation of a certain radical group in the Middle East, known as Mandeans, who don't believe in Jesus Christ and only give hail to John the Baptist. After the invasion of Iraq by the United States and its allies in 2003, the Mandean community of Iraq, which before the war numbered 60 to 70 persons, collapsed, with the most community relocating to Iran, Syria, and Jordan, or forming a diaspora communities beyond the Middle East. But the biggest syncretic polytheistic religion in the Middle East is Yazidism, with more than 1 million persons in belief. It developed through a complex historical process involving a pre-Islamic Kurdish religious substratum and the teachings of Sheikh Ali ibn Mustafir. The Yazidis believe in a divine triad. The supreme, the hidden god of the Yazidis, is considered to be remote and inactive in relation to his creation, Tawusi Malik, the peacock angel. This type of religion in Europe was Bogomilism. dualistic religion popular with the Slavs in Balkans. And if Bogomilism spawned in Armenia and traveled somehow into the Balkans, it was influenced by the Slavs and their beliefs. In 20th century, many dictators tried to get rid of those religions, such as Saddam Hussein and his genocide of, well, Yazidis, Sunnis, Shias. I don't think this guy liked anybody that lived in this country. In Iran, the resettlement of pagans and Sunnis also happened. And let's not forget about the 20th century World War I Ottoman Empire, which got rid of the Armenians and other smaller cultural groups that were in the way. One of the groups that was eradicated by the Ottoman Kurd during World War I with the Armenians were Shemsi, which this video is about. Not many works was written about them, sadly. In 2010, from many sources, a work was created by Rach O'Donoghue. Only in the 19th century, adventurers and conversos dedicated some of their time to the Szemsi. It seems from the sources that they were swallowed by the Orthodox Assyrian Church of Mardin. They cannot be counted as Muslims, Christians, or Jews, but their doctrine mirrors all of those. Their name Szamsijja or Szemsi derives from a Jewish word, Shamash, which means sun. The presence of Szemsi is also recorded in the Ottoman sources, both in Ahmed, Diyarbakir, and Mardin in the first Tahir register conducted in 1518 in Diyarbakir to identify people liable to the constitutional tax. Szamsijja does not list the Szemsi, but the second Tahir register identified the Szemsi as separate congregation. It is known that in the 13th and the 16th century, they had a separate quarters and a cemetery in Mardin. In Mardin, the people locality of Szamsijja, where the majority of inhabitants were said to be the Szemsi people. 22, 66, and 82 people liable for the tax are recorded in 1608 and 1611, 1692 to 93, and 1694 to 1905, respectively. Given that the ratio of those liable for the tax, the general population was 1 to 5, it can be summarized that no more than 400 Szemsi lived in Mardin in the 17th century. Simeon, the Polish traveler who visited Mardin in the early 17th century, claimed that the Szemsi were Armenian speakers. Simeon noticed that the temple at the Mardin gate, its remnants of which apparently survived until modern times when the road was widened. Simeon alleged that in the temple of the Szemsi used to gather every Saturday night, pray, but also hold incestuous orgies. It must be said that those kind of accusations have burdened all esoteric religions in the Middle East, such as the Alawites, Druze, and the Yazidis, and their veracity is doubtful. Simeon reported that a governor who heard about these sessions asked the sect of their origin. They said that they were Armenian. The governor then gave them the choice of either attend a mosque or Armenian church or be put to the sword. The Szemsi promised to attend the Armenian church. The governor threatened them with reprisals if they did not keep their promise. The frightened Szemsi were then said to have stopped using the temple, and many migrated to Iran, to Rabdin Mountains, Tokent, Merzifon, and elsewhere. Simeon also noted that the sect was known as Arevoritic, sons of the sun, among the Armenians since the 5th century, and that the sect was thought to be Persian of origin. In the Chronicle of Matthew of Edessa of the 12th century, Matthew mentions that the sun-worshipping Arevbach, also known as Arevoriti, who appeared to have maintained the cult of fire. Daula Rir notes that there lived in the city of Samoste, which means sun, and that the Gordie Marikudros, who wrote in the 11th century, mentions this sect in a letter addressed to the Patriarch of Syrians. Those of Samosate wanted to embrace Christianity in the following century, as it can be seen from a letter of Patriarch Saint Narcissus the Gracious, Thomas Merdoziksi. I can't read this name, it's a Persian name, sorry for that. Historian of the 15th century, said, recounting the invasion of Timur, Tamerlan into Mesopotamia. He came to Mardin and vandalized this city. He destroyed from top to bottom 4 villages lived by the worshippers of Sun, the Avreloti, Shol, Shamarkach, Safari, and Magragi. But afterwards, with the instigations of Satan, these sectarians multiplied in Mardin and Amid. Satan is a reference to much vilified Yazidis who had been erroneously labeled as devil worshippers. The possible connection between the Yazidis is also strengthened by existence of a major tribe among the Yazidis or Armenia named Shemsijja. Michael Fabre, who lived among the Yazidis in the 17th century, noted that there were 9,000 to 10,000 Shemsis, though he does not indicate how he arrived at this estimate. He also reported that they have neither temples nor churches to pray to God. They gather only in certain underground places and forts outside the cities to assemble together and treat subjects of their religion, which they do secretly, so it can never be discovered, that which they do amongst themselves. According to Faber, even those converted to Christianity, out of fear of being assassinated, did not reveal the secrets of the religion, due to resolution which was adopted by their assembly. Faber also recounted that the Pashas, seeing that they have no temples and that they live like beasts without professing any religion externally, which is recognized by its rites and its ceremonies, like those of other nations, forced the Szemsi to choose either Islam or a Christian sect, recognized and tolerated by the Empire of the Turks. They joined the Syrian Jacobites to avoid becoming Turks. Faber noted that the Szemsi did not follow Jacobite practices and continued holding secret assemblies. In his subsequent publication, in 1682, Faber noted that about 6 years ago, 1676, 2 young Szemsi went to Aleppo to be baptized by the Armenian Catholic bishop and abandoned their errors in general, without wanting to specify which instance in particular of their bad practices and superstitions of their unfortunate sect. In his subsequent publication, Faber also recounted his voyage to Diyarbakir, to Baghdad, in a caravan. One of his traveling companion, a rich merchant, was named Joseph, a common name among the Muslims, Christians and Jews alike. Faber, observing Joseph's habits or discourse, could not figure out to which of 3 religion he belonged to, because he did not seem to be practicing any of these, rather living as a pagan. He was informed by third parties that the merchant was Shemsi. Others said he was a Muslim. When Faber inquired directly about the merchant's religion, whenever or not he was a Christian, he, in Setovoke, said that he was. However, when Faber pressed further to find out which Christian congregation, the merchant changed the subject. The next reference to the Szemsi can be found in 1739, study about Manichaeanism. They believe in God, paradise, hell, last judgment, and honor Jesus Christ. It is said that they are united with the Jacobites of Syria. They are valiant but humane, hospitable, and live among us in great harmony. This is inconsistent with both Simeon and Faber's biased accounts. The Danish traveler and explorer Castor Niebuhr, who visited the Assyrians in Mardin, remarked that in the 1760s, to the community of Jacobites belong also the Szemsi. These seem to have been patronized not only by the Mohammedans, but also by the Christians. An old man assured me that in his youth he knew many villages in the mountainous parts of the country hereabouts, which professed this religion. At present, it is believed there are none of the Szemsi in the country, but at Mardin there still exists about 100 families in 2 different quarters. Formerly, but a few years ago, these existed as a separate communion. But when the idea came into the mind of Sultan Mustafa to compel all the Christians and Jews into the empire to either become Mohammedans or to quit the country, all the grandees of the kingdom, not even expecting the Mufti, refused their assent to their order, since the Mohammed himself had, on condition of an annual capital taxation, granted protection to the Christians and Jews. The edict was remodeled, And with the view of giving some satisfaction to the sovereign, it was ordered that thenceforth no persons should be suffered in the country, except those who had sacred books. The Szemsi were far too weak. They, therefore, submitted themselves to the Jacobite patriarch Ad-Dishkabekir, and ever since that time they call themselves Christians and dress as such. All their Christianity, however, consists in their dress and in the circumstance that they have their children baptized. There is seldom seen at the church any of their sect expecting a couple whom they send regularly in order to avoid the accusation of never appearing at the church. They also have a Jacobite ecclesiastic to assist at the interment of their dead. But they do not allow him to enter the house till the coffin is closed. When he follows the corpse to the burning ground for Shemsi, I heard nothing positive concerning their religious tenets. The Christians at Mardin told me that they always build the principal door of their houses towards the east, and that they always turn their faces towards the sun when they pray. An Anglican missionary, Wolf, who had visited Mardin in 1825, says that it was Sultan Murad, 150 years prior, who ordered all the sects without a sacred book to be put to death. The Shemsi were in danger of being exterminated. The Syriac patriarch reportedly bought 100 Shemsi families for 1,000 piaster on the condition that they would embrace the Christian faith to which they submitted voluntarily. Wolf notes that their practice of Christianity was not sincere, and that on his insistence the bishop Abdullah found him two Shemsi notables to inquire about their religion. They told him that they believe in a God, and that they are friends of all men. When pressed by Wolf to find out whenever they believed in Holy Trinity, they responded, "Why not?" Evidently, the two Shemsi provided the answers which would please the inquirer. When asked about their origin of their name, and all that they said was that was their name. Wolf noted that there were no intermarriages between the Shemsi and the Syriac Orthodox. It is difficult to ascertain the veracity of some of Wolf's account, especially in relation to the narrative about the patriarch buying the Szamsijja. From whom were they bought is not specified. Was it paid as tax to the palace? It was not very clear. Also, in another source, through relying on the account of Wolf, it states that it was the patriarch of the Nestorians, rather than the Syriac Orthodox, who paid the 1,000 piaster. Consequently, most of the accounts are not reliable in this aspect and are likely to be errors, as we shall see.
The missionary Giuseppe Campanile, in his 1818 study, states that the Szemsi joined the Syriac Orthodox Church only for protection during the reign of Sultan Mustafa, and that when the danger subsided, they abandoned Christianity and resumed their old way. Campanile reports that Sultan Murad passed by Mardin with a large army in 1693 on his way to take back Baghdad from the Persians. The Syrians accused the Szemsi of idolatry. The Sultan, who did not want idolatrous people in his domain, ordered them to embrace Mohammedanism. Reportedly, the Jacobite patriarch, hoping to bring the sect to Christianity, gave a sum of silver to the Sultan to buy the Szemsi. However, the Szemsi continued to worship within the confines of their own religion. After 70 years of continuous brawls between them, in 1763, they were compelled by the Jacobites, who once again, reportedly, bribed government officials to force the Szemsi to enter the Syriac Orthodox churches to practice Christian worship. Much like Wolf's account, Campanile's information also contains factual errors. Mustafa I ruled between 1617 to 18 and 1622 to 23, also known as Mustafa the Mad, Delhi Mustafa. He was more likely suffering from mental illness. Most of his life was imprisoned in his room by the palace clique. It would have been unlikely that Mustafa I ordered the Szemsi to convert to Islam or Christianity. Reportedly, he was so weak that he could not even ride a horse. Mustafa II ruled between 1695 to 1703. We know that Fabre, that by then the Szemsi already united with the Syriac Orthodox Church. Murad IV ruled between 1623 and 1640, and waged a campaign to Baghdad in 1639. It is possible that Campanile made a typographical error starting in 1639, as that year Murad passed through Mardin in 1693. Ahmed II was the Sultan of the Ottoman throne. Walpole, who visited Mardin in 1850, also mentions that it was during the Sultan Murad's reign that the Syriac patriarch of the day took them under his protection. Known as worshippers of the sun, they could not divulge any information about their religion even to the patriarch who protected them. The penalty for divulging such details of the religion was stated to be death from the hands of their fellows, which explains the difficulties in obtaining reliable information. The narratives about Shemsi's conversion are varied to such extent to be almost apocryphal. It is either an unmanned governor, pasha, or sultan, Mustafa or Murad, who forced the Szemsi to convert to a recognized religion. Evidently, there are many inconsistencies in these narratives. We do know from Faber that the conversion occurred much earlier than suggested by either Campanile or Wolff. In fact, Syriac sources suggest that the Szemsi joined the Syriac Orthodox Church congregation in 500 AD. A document of Patriarch Ibrahim Bar Garib, dated 1400 AD, state that Szemsis were led to God's obedience and the doctrine of the Syrians 900 years ago. The date of conversion suggested in this document coincides with the construction of the Deir al-Zafran monastery. However, this date is more likely to be an approximate. A document by Basilius Mafronio of the East in 1446 still suggests that the conversion took place 900 years ago, 546 maybe, and a letter by Patriarch Ignatius Caliph in 1458 does the same. Clearly, these latter documents copied from the original document by Patriarch Ibrahim Bar Garib. A manuscript by Mar Basilius Mafronio of the East in 1460 states that the Szemsi united with the Syrians 920 years prior. A letter by Patriarch Davud Shah in 1460 states that the Szemsis joined our fold, the Syrian Orthodox Church, and united themselves to us. And we and they became one. They have in their possession documents attesting to this, and I issued for them this present document. I testified in it, as my fathers did earlier, that the Szemsis are members of our body, they are our brothers, and from our community. They follow our path, our law, and tradition. Another document issued by Patriarch Abd-Allah in 1521, which refers to the original issued by Ignatius Ibrahim Bar Garib, still states that Szemsis were guided to God's obedience and the doctrine of the Syrians 900 years ago, while Patriarch Mark Ignatius in 1542 wrote that for the last 962 years or more they mixed with the Syrian denomination and adopted its beliefs. What we can summarize from these invaluable sources is that the Szemsi joined the Syrian Orthodox congregation much earlier than the missionaries and the travelers were led to believe. It is certain that they were given a blatantly false information. Despite the attestation by the patriarchs that the Szemsi maintained the unity of God and followed the gospel according to the customs of the Syrians in their prayers, baptism, matrimony, and burial of the dead, the fact of the Szemsi periodically requested certification suggests that their true conversion was doubted by the congregation itself. These documents were couched in such manner that they could, if need be presented to Muslim religious leaders. The Szemsi of Dayakabir strove to keep these documents until the 1840s. As to the origin of the Szemsi people, some theories were promulgated in the 19th century. Brookhart, who visited the Anhayari, claimed that they divided into three sects, the Kelbe, the Szemsi, and Mokladi, which suggests a connection between the Szemsi and the Anayari, also known as Nusaris and Alawis. Volney also described the Anayari as divided into three classes, the Szamsijja, adorers of the sun, the Kelbia, or the worshippers of the moon and dogs, and the Kadmusi, who worshipped woman, particularly a female organ. Hüseyin Türk, in his study of Nusayaris in Turkey, notes that one branch of Nusayri, the Hayadri, also known as Shemsis, does one hypothesis in that the Shemsi originated from the Anayari, Nusayri, an offshoot of the Shiites, but just like the Alawis, and the Druzis moved away from Islam completely to a unique system of beliefs. Campanile notes that it was not known when the sect is established itself in Mardin. Some people say that some of his families emigrated from India. Others assure that for a long time they lived dispersed in villages, and some not without some foundation support that they were from the Arabia Felix, and because of the upheavals which occurred, certain families fled and came to establish themselves in Mardin. Elsewhere, connection has been suggested between the Shemsis and Zoroastrianism. Walter Caitlin Kelly, who wrote in 1844, claimed that the Syrians distinguished the Yazidis into several classes, such as the Shemsites, worshippers of the suns, the Shamanites, the Satanists, and the Caphalas, cutthroats. The Shemsis, they say, are scattered descendants of their ancient Gubers, Zoroastrians, whose deity was principle of fire, and who worship the sun as the great source of the light and heat. They are by no means numerous in Syria, but in all probability these distinctions are unfounded, for all the Yazidis appear to have one common creed, a traditional version, apparently, of the old Magian doctrines, mingled with the diverse, extravagant fables. In the ever-persistent compulsion in the Turkish historiography of connection of every ethnic group or nation that lived in Anatolia to Turkic origins, it is claimed that the Szemsi were specifically of Oghuz Turkish through apparently Christian Oghuz background, discounting the latter as not serious scholarly consideration. There is still a number of hypotheses which remain outstanding. Bruinessen notes that the exact information based on Niebuhr's and Simeon's accounts is insignificant for deciding whenever the Shemsis were related to the older Sabaeans of Haran, as some would have it, or whenever the small Yazidi communities still existing in same areas have absorbed them and preserved elements of the religion. Indeed, this scanned information does not allow us to speculate about the size of the sect, their precise religious beliefs and or practices of their religion. Some information concerning their religious practices have been recorded, but this information seems to be second-hand rather than through direct observation. From the limited amount of information available about the religion, it could be said that they share some religious tenets with Yazidis, Sabaeans, Zoroastrians, Alawites, and Druzis, given that the gnostic elements are present in all these religions. We can deduct from this is that Gnosticism has influenced many religions in the Middle East. Their secrecy prevented their neighbors to find much about their religion and rituals. In fact, the only reliable fact is that the obsession with secrecy of the sect as reported by many observers.
The Shemsi were then considered to be Christian Jacobites, but they seem to have played a lip service to formalities of Christianity. It seems certain, however, they assimilated into the Assyrian Orthodox Syriac community in Mardin, in Turkey. As to their worship, we have little information other than being sun worshippers. Campanile notes that they venerated cows and that they have met 3 times a year to make an idol of pate in form of a kind of lamb and put in it a big ball of tin by covering only the head. They pray in front of it, prostrate themselves, kiss it with big respect, and demonstrate many other acts of adoration. At the end of these rituals, the leaders of the sect, which are to the number of 12, make small pieces which they introduce into the mouth of the helpers. It is worthy of note that early in the 20th century rumors were circulating that the Druzis also used calf representation in their rituals. Hitti noted the existence of a gold figurine of a calf used in the leading places of seclusion was ascertained beyond doubt. Southgate, who visited the Syriac Orthodox Jacobite in Mardin in the 19th century, noted that the Szemsi attend the worship of their church, observe its feasts and fasts, baptize their children, wear the dress of the Christians, associate with them, and are married by Jacobite priests. They do not, however, intermarry with the Syrians or with any out of their own number. called themselves by their old name, Shemsi, while they distinguished the Syrians as Christians. My host informed me that recently a few of them wished to become Syrian Catholics and applied to him for the purpose. He declined receiving them, expecting on a condition that they should renounce their peculiarities and intermarry with his people. To this they were unwilling to accede, urging that they were a distinct race and had habits and customs differing from those of the Christians. The bishop, however, persisted in exacting his condition, and they remained where they were, rather than comply with it. Their language is Arabic, and they are said to practice still, in secret, some of their ancient rites. At the burial of their dead, a priest is called, and, having said prayers over the body, is dismissed, after which they go through with certain private ceremonies, to which none but their own number are admitted. They also have a great festival, which occurs annually when a kind of cake is made, and all having assembled, they indulge in amusement and festivity for a while. The cake is then placed in the midst of a room, and the lights are being suddenly extinguished. They rush towards it, each struggling to seize a portion. Buckingham, who also visited Mardin, tried to obtain information about the Shemsi. Buckingham notes that politically the Shemsi were regarded part of the Syrian patriarch's flock. The same patriarch, after an intimacy of many years with some of the heads of these people, could never obtain from them any disclosure on the subject of their religion, as they all agreed that death from the hand of their fellows would be a penalty of such a crime. The number of the Szamsijja was stated to be now about 1,000 families, but everyone admitted that the greatest care was taken by them to prevent the disclosure of their real tenets. Despite the factual errors noted above, Campanille's account contains some interesting observations. Campanille notes that if they speak with Turks, they claim to be Turks, and brag to be Jewish with the Jews and Christians with the Christians. This seems to be a practice of disillusion, taqiyya, which both the Druzes and Alawite practiced, which strengthens the hypothesis about the connection between the sects. I think it's the funniest part. I gotta steal a bit of the video for myself here, so sorry for that. But it's the funniest shit I ever heard. That imagine a tax collector comes and you say, and he's Jewish, and you just say,
Oy vey, this land was promised to me 3,000 years ago, and the $20 are not coming from the Ottoman Empire.
And when the Turkish fucking tax collector comes, they say they're Turkish. I actually lost voice. I lost my voice doing this bit. Oh my god. I mean, everyone knows they're not Turkish, Jewish, or Christian, but I guess they still got away with it for like a very long time, which is impressive. Okay, enough of my talking. Campanile also collected some information about the cultural and religious practices of the Szemsi. He reported that the Szemsi believed that their sins are tied to hairs. Also, when one of them is near death, they shave off his beard, his hair, and other body hair to speed up death. After death, they drip liquor to his hair throat to quicken the journey to the other world, as they say. They also put a gold coin in their hand to pay for the entrance to a paradise. A Jacobite priest comes to bury them, but they do not allow him to see the body before it is put in beer and tied. The women distinguished themselves from those of the country because they carried a white topcoat. All lived inside the city of Mardin. They were poor and lived very poorly. It was very difficult to have other details on them because they made everything a big secret for fear of being discovered and accused of idolatry. One of their religious cultural practices up to the mid-19th century was to bury their dead with many of their household belongings, arms and gold and silver jewelry. They had their own graveyard in Daikabir. In the early 19th century, the sect is said to have numbered about 50 families, according to Campanile. Dubre, who visited Mardin in the early 19th century, noted that there were 800 Shemsis, Another source reported that there were 15,000 Shemsis in Mesopotamia in 1824, which seems unlikely. Consequently, the size of the community in the 19th century also remains an unsolved issue. There are some claims that the Shemsi survived up to the mid-20th century, or at least some individuals continued practicing the religion. Reportedly, up to World War I, no more than 20 of families were still living in Daikabir and Mardin under the name of Szamsijja. In Mardin, they occupied the private districts in the Surgate and had a small new church in the name of the Virgin. Ahmed Gökçen, who writes on Yazidis, claims that the Shemsi sect survived right up to the 1960s. The Mar Gabriel Monastery has the sun symbol in one of its walls, and the Syriac Orthodox Church in the village of Sar, as well as the Mar Jonan Church, has a sun relief. Those examples suggest to sever the existence of sun worshippers in centuries preceding Christianity. It should be added that part of another Syriac church, Mar Behnam, also once served as a sun worshipper's temple. All references in the 19th century suggest that the Shemsi resisted becoming Christians for centuries, if not for more than a millennium. They may have eventually capitulated and joined Syriac Orthodox congregation in practice as well in spirit, and, perhaps through intermarriage, integrated fully with the Assyrians. What a shame to see such interesting and weird religion go. All I have to say is thank you for watching, and see you later.